important piece of the puzzle here. Love to hear more, Jason, from you about the view from the legislature. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Hello? All right, awesome. Well, I'll start off by saying thanks to the other panelists who were on, and I just as everyone was summarizing, Secretary Brennan, Secretary Thompson, Chairman Volk, they all kind of hit the nail on the head on EVs. And just to summarize, EVs are coming. They're not only coming, but they're here. We have 10,000 cars in the state, nearly 500 chargers throughout the state, amongst thousands of home chargers and 240 volt EV plugs in homes and battery banks. Over the next decade, we'll see close to potentially 200 different vehicle models available to consumers. You have manufacturers like Ford and GM attaching iconic brands like Mustang, F-150, Hummer to EVs. You have legendary racing brands like Porsche setting new records at the Nürburgring. You can't deny that electric vehicles are here. And Wisconsin needs to adopt the infrastructure necessary to adapt to that growing demand and that change within the automobile industry. I mean, if you look back at the turn of the century, the change from horses to automobiles occurred in 20 to 30 years. I think we can expect that electric vehicles could happen even quicker. So Wisconsin needs to address these fast-growing trends, and we need to update our statutes so that we ensure that we're creating the environment necessary to build the infrastructure and power and service these vehicles, not just in our main hubs of Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, where our district is, but throughout the state, so that we can take advantage of electric vehicles, electric tourism, out of state tourism throughout the state. You know, people who live in city centers in other states and in our state can take advantage of the Northwoods without having to deal with range anxiety. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of electric vehicles overall, but also some legislation that we've been working on in the office of Senator Cowles regarding electric vehicles. And I was happy that Chairman Volk said this towards the end of her comments, that we need to create the legal clarity for third-party ownership of electric vehicle charging stations. And we have legislation that we've been working on that does exactly that. We need to be clear in our state statutes about electric vehicle charging stations. So in legislation that we're soon hoping to have available for co-sponsorship in the next week or 2 weeks, we wanted to provide statutory assurances to those in the private market and for third-party ownership that when they make these investments and they make this infrastructure available to the public, that they'll be able to charge a fee, that they know how they can charge fees, that their devices won't be disconnected from the grid, that statutes include successor technologies, that we ensure that we're surrounding them with the best possible language and and excluding them from being designated as a public utility, because electric vehicle charging stations are a unique product. It's one of the only products that I can think of that's conveying electricity to an end user that's not owned by a public utility or investor-owned utility, a co-op. So you have something that's kind of unique. We need to develop that statutory framework so that people are willing to take that investment and run with it and really develop a charging station network around the state that is robust, reaches all of the corners, and really grows what we need in this state to develop and service our electric vehicle owners. And one of the things that we also wanted to do, and I appreciate you mentioning our 2019 legislation, is bring back legislation or some minor changes to utilize those Volkswagen settlement funds for electric vehicle charging corridors. So in the legislation that we had in 2019, one of the things that I thought was the most unique and exciting is that we really were focused on taking our state's major thoroughfares that connect our 4 neighboring states so that we can really take advantage of out-of-state tourism with those who are driving electric vehicles. I mean, you look at city centers like Chicago and central Iowa and Minneapolis area, and bringing those electric vehicle users into our state for tourism, for outdoor recreation. Those are exciting opportunities. So we plan on bringing back a reiteration of that bill from last session that uses a portion of the remaining Volkswagen settlement funds to provide grants, which will ultimately move towards establishing these charging corridors. We think that utilizing this funding is good. I mean, we're one of only 4 states left in the country that hasn't used a portion of our distributed Volkswagen settlement funds to install electric vehicle charging stations. 46 other states have taken advantage of this. And utilizing that grant funding really will take a big chunk out of the concern that I think a lot of first-time electric vehicle purchasers have in range anxiety. Alleviating that concern should be a top priority for Wisconsin, just to encourage tourism throughout the state. EV driving tourists tend to flock to currently tend to flock towards urban centers like Madison, Milwaukee. Breaking that out, having people go to the Northwoods, utilizing the beauty of Southwest Wisconsin and the driftless region to ensure that people can drive up for a weekend from Chicago or down from Winona, Minnesota to explore that region of our state is really a great opportunity. Another bill that we're working on that we think can help facilitate further investment into electric vehicle charging stations is we have more of a robust bill, but one of the changes that we make in this bill to make alterations to the PACE program is authorizing electric vehicle charging stations as an allowable cost for financing under the PACE program. We think that this is a good change to the PACE program and is just another tool that we can use to help further the infrastructure needs of electric vehicles throughout the state. We think that that's something that really would be a benefit to that program and kind of add some flexibility and more robust nature to some of the financing projects that you see coming out of the PACE program. But one of the things that I think is the most exciting out of this package of bills that we're working on is certainly creating the statutory framework necessary so that we can have third-party ownership of electric vehicle charging stations. We're generally really excited about that and hope to have that legislation available for a co-sponsorship in the next couple weeks. But I think that just the temperament in the legislature over the last 2 years, I think you can see that there's a shift in the market that's occurred naturally. And I think that legislators will have to take note of that. I think that we'll have to recognize that electric vehicles are going to become a more robust part of automobile model availability to consumers. I mean, go back 2 years ago when we first put out our legislation in 2019 to use the Volkswagen settlement funds for electric vehicle charging stations. There was no Hummer, there was no F-150. It was Tesla, it was Fisker, it was small manufacturers for the most part. Now we've got, iconic brands like Mustang, which is, I don't know if it gets much more apple pie and patriotism than a Ford Mustang, but Ford felt that was necessary to attach an electric vehicle brand to that iconic brand. I think that you naturally will see more adoption of electric vehicle within the legislature, and I think that that's an exciting opportunity as we bring this legislation forward to try to get it passed through the legislature. And if there's any questions or at all, I'll use the last couple minutes that I've got to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Hi. Hey, Jason, Ben Prohaska. I'm the ED for the Electrification Coalition, so appreciate you participating. And one question I guess I always think of is we very much are right in the center of trying to help bridge that gap and the recognition that EVs and electrification really does need to be a bipartisan issue. And I think we talk a lot about the idea that it's an economic and national security focus. And that's one of the reasons so that it moves the debate beyond just some of the traditional arguments that are made. But curious, as you look at the Wisconsin legislature and the opportunities that exist there, What do you think is going to help really bring more legislative allies that are going to, go across party lines, so to speak, and realize that this should be a part of Wisconsin's future, and we need to start leading more?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of work that's gone into the last few years. I mean, groups like Renew, Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, Customers First. I mean, some of these organizations have done a great job reaching across the aisle, talking to legislators of both parties to push this issue forward and kind of make sure that people recognize that electric vehicles are part of it. And I also think that there's just a natural shift in the market that we haven't seen. I mean, not just necessarily within electric vehicles, but within the energy sector larger. I mean, you're seeing a lot more announcements of retirement. You're seeing a lot more announcements of new renewable energy generation facilities at the utility scale. And just as you drive throughout neighborhoods, you're seeing more people, taking the opportunity to self-finance their own solar panels. So you're seeing kind of a transition towards renewable energy, electrification of vehicles, just kind of naturally occurring. And I think utilizing kind of that natural change within the private sector and helping encourage that through passing legislation to make sure that the private sector can operate the way that it feels that it necessarily wants to, by transitioning towards electric vehicles, by gas stations, restaurants, rural downtowns being able to say, why don't you come to our downtown? Why don't you come to our small restaurant? Why don't you come to our gas station? Utilizing those types of small business resources and having those folks chat with Republican legislators and Democrat legislators to have them be cognizant of the fact that there is a small business need for electric vehicle charging stations. It's another opportunity to drive resources into areas, not just necessarily right off the highway, but if you're driving through the driftless region of Southwest Wisconsin, or you're on your way up north to someone's lake house or your cabin, and you head through, Shawano, Wisconsin, which is in our district, stop off downtown, charge your vehicle, walk around for 15 minutes, stop in some small stores. I think that there's an opportunity to utilize electric vehicle charging stations in a manner that help drive more people into locations that they might not necessarily otherwise use if they just had fossil fuel powered vehicles.
So we have to move on to the next section, but there were a couple of questions really quickly that are kind of the same. What's the current timeline for legislative approval on the budget request? And if you had a quick answer.
Some of the things have been taken out of the budget. I mean, as you know, statutorily, they want to have things moved by, the end of June, but it's the legislature and things change by the day. So in terms of the budget, we really wanted to focus on, what we have in terms of legislation, putting that through legislation. Senator Cowles has always been a champion of not having non-fiscal policy in the budget. That's a long-standing thing. People who are other staffers or within the legislature for a long time within Wisconsin politics will kind of chuckle because they've heard that mantra so many times. So a lot of these things that don't have a fiscal impact, we really hope to bring some of these things forward in a legislation and move that through the legislature kind of in a separate track. But we would be supportive of things that can occur in a fiscal manner through the budget.
Well, inspired by your poster in the background, I think EVs fit into the idea of do or do not. There is no try, and so we look forward to working with the Wisconsin legislature.
I'm pretty sure the electric Porsche Taycan can make it through the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. So.
Excellently done. First time I've ever heard EV reference and connecting it to the Millennium Falcon. So with that, thank you so much for joining. We look forward to working with your office more. And
sounds good. Yeah.
We're gonna
appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.